I am live streaming from my office here on the ground floor of the Alaska State Capitol, where we are awaiting soon the governor, Governor Mike Dunleavy, with a live stream of his State of the State address. We are currently in the 10th day of the legislative cycle, and we're moving along at a pretty quick clip. This is a 90-day session, or 120 days by Constitution. And what that means is we are going to have to get a lot of work done here in the last 80 days of session. I can tell you that it hasn't been easy. The Senate organized on the first day of session, naming Senator Peter Micciche of the Kenai Peninsula the president of the Senate. We've already been assigned to various committees. The current finance committee structure has been set, and we are now working on deciding who sits on each of the subcommittees to evaluate each of the items that are of the budget that are coming forward for the agencies. The House, on the other hand, has had a little bit of tough time deliberating who should be leader. They are split right down the center at a 20-20 vote. It's 20 Republicans, and then on the other side, there's a combination of Republicans, Democrats, and independent voters who are trying to have a coalition government similar to the one that they had in the previous cycle. There's a lot of new people in the Capitol as well. There's two new senators, one from Fairbanks, North Pole area, and that's Rob Myers. He replaced the outgoing Senator John Coghill. There's also another member from Anchorage, East Anchorage side, who replaces the Senate president, and that's Roger Holland. And so we are working to meet all the new members, meeting all the new staff, and trying to get a handle on what's going to happen this year. We're looking forward to the governor introducing sort of his idea of what should happen, and the legislature, of course, will fine tune it. Of course, we are in charge of the budget, so we will have a robust discussion. We also are in charge of passing legislation that the governor will forward to us. We're hoping to hear a lot about what the governor has to say when the time comes and when he's joining our live stream here. So that's us from the Capitol. If there are questions or comments, please feel free to type them in the chat. I will be answering them as they go along, as well as giving a little bit of commentary as the governor proceeds with his State of the State address. So you're hearing from Senator Scott Kawasaki right here in Juneau. It's a great pleasure to be able to join you this evening as we await the governor in his State of the State address at this State of the State watch party. Let's see, we don't have any questions quite yet, so I'll just continue on with some of the things that we're looking forward to. This year, I will be serving on the Senate State Affairs Committee and the Senate Resources Committee. Both are very active already. We've already met once in each committee. The Senate State Affairs Committee took on a bill that I know has gotten traction. At least folks from Fairbanks are talking about it, and folks across the state. And that's a bill dealing with election reforms. That's how it's being billed. It's a challenging bill. I believe it doesn't actually accomplish what it needs to accomplish. There are some reforms that are potentially needed. But I think that it's going to make it harder for regular everyday Alaskans to vote, to register, and to help their neighbors vote. And so I will be making comments in committee, in the State Affairs Committee over the next several weeks, listening to folks who have delivered emails, phone calls, and things like that in order to make the process better. We all, I think, have that goal to make the process better for Alaskans. And, we might have some disagreements in how that could be accomplished, but I wholeheartedly believe that we're down here for the right reasons and that we will get that done. Let's see, we are still waiting on the governor in his live stream State of the State. There are 511 people watching online on the live stream. That'll start soon. It's also being broadcast on public broadcasting on KTOO, and also online on his Facebook. I believe it's also on YouTube and other resources. So we will be waiting for the governor here. Hopefully he will come in soon and give us his comments. So what are we hoping to hear from him? Well, we're coming in facing $1 billion budget deficit. Oh, here he comes. Let's hear the governor.
Lieutenant Governor Meyer, President Machicki, members of the 32nd Legislature, and fellow Alaskans. Exactly 1 year ago tonight, the pandemic landed on our nation's shores just a few miles from where I sit. From the beginning, the deck was stacked against us. They pointed to our lack of infrastructure and hospital capacity. They claimed Alaska would suffer the fate of third world countries. Health experts warned us of 14,000 hospitalizations and over 10,000 dead. And I would be lying if I said the tragedy of 1918 didn't weigh deeply on me. I lived in those villages and was forever changed by the stories of elders who survived. These stories compelled me to ensure there would be no repeat of 1918 on my watch. From that first night, we committed to handling the virus and its fallout without politicizing it, without partisan bickering. We were one in our battle against this poorly understood foe. Today, and against all odds, Alaska leads the way in testing and vaccinations. We enjoy the third lowest mortality rate in the nation. Those who predicted utter devastation were wrong, because we're not just Americans, we're Alaskans. We shine when others expect us to fail. When we get knocked down, we create opportunity from calamity. Alaskans are a different breed. Our history and culture has been honed by our close proximity to nature and our distance from our fellow states. This frontier experience, this ability to rely on ourselves and each other, is what gets us through everything from earthquakes to floods to volcanic eruptions, and the same goes for this pandemic. We don't run and hide as Alaskans. We inherited that same mentality that helped build this country and helped build this great state, that we are going to come out on top no matter what. I remember a meeting last spring with a few members of my amazing health team. We were on a video call with Hans Vogel, who owns a manufacturing company in Palmer. We dumped a bunch of PPE and testing supplies on a table and asked if there was anything here he could make. As we all know, Hans and Trivarius ended up making over 100,000 swabs for testing when we needed them the most. Distilleries stepped up and began producing hand sanitizer. Everyday Alaskans organized charity campaigns and food drives out of the goodness of their hearts. And heroes like John Sturgeon used their business connections overseas to secure an entire aircraft full of PPE when every other state was struggling to source supplies. The University of Alaska graduated 260 nurses to the pandemic front lines, as well as 400 contract tracers. With the help of the legislature, many of these nurses were graduated early, thanks to nearly 300 regulatory suspensions that took place under the emergency declaration. We created the first traveler testing program in the nation, catching nearly 2,400 cases of COVID at our airports. We held a safe summer fishing season that many told us would be impossible. None of this would have occurred without your help and the tireless work of Alaska's health team. Individuals such as Commissioner Adam Crum, Dr. Ann Zink, Director Heidi Hedberg, Dr. Joe McLaughlin, and the thousands of public servants and frontline heroes working overtime month after month right up until today. Because of what we accomplished together, Alaska's response was recently recognized as the best in the nation. As a result of the pandemic, we also incurred an economic crisis as well. Now comes the hard work of getting our economy up off its knees. Last year, we worked quickly to provide direct relief to 200 communities and nearly 6,000 small businesses. Just 2 weeks after we received our CARES Act relief, our spending plan was approved by the legislature. We dispersed $1 billion in unemployment relief to over 100,000 Alaskans. We stood up a housing relief program. We delivered a historic early PFD, which assisted thousands of Alaskans in their time of need. And while our statewide mandates were among the least restrictive in the nation, especially after we more fully understood the nature of this virus, the economic fallout from the federal closure of the cruise season, massive declines in tourism, and business closures in some of our cities set the stage for economic hardship. However, We are fortunate that we have the tools to greatly assist Alaskans in their time of need, but we do need to act quickly. As part of my path forward for Alaskans, I'm asking that $5 billion, a portion of the earnings of this past year, be put toward pulling Alaskans out of the crisis, the likes of which this generation has never faced. This is a once-in-a-lifetime budget for a once-in-a-lifetime disaster. A portion of this relief will provide every eligible Alaskan with $5,000, equaling the remainder of last year's PFD and the full statutory dividend for 2021. If we cannot find it within ourselves to put to use less than 1 year's worth of fund growth so that the thousands of Alaskans and businesses impacted can get back on their feet, then we have to question our priorities as leaders in Alaska during its time of need. In addition to getting Alaskans help now, we need to create a long-term fiscal solution as well. Creating generational opportunity starts with getting our own fiscal house in order. First, we must implement a spending cap that works, a cap that causes government to pass budgets it can afford. Second, any new broad-based tax must be approved by the Alaskan people. We must ensure that people are partners in any taxation and spending plan going forward. And finally, we must guarantee there is a dividend for future generations and that the earnings reserve and the integrity of the fund is protected forever. My proposal guarantees dividends for future generations and ensures our state can continue to function as well. As I've always said, Alaskans must be part of any change contemplated to the dividend formula. My proposal calls for a vote of the people as early as this spring on any changes to the dividend program. We must also look for creative ways to augment our revenue. This session, I'll be supporting legislation to bring gaming to Alaska. Alaska can no longer afford to deny itself a revenue stream available to nearly every other state in the nation. Along with enhancing revenue, gaming could create hundreds of high-paying jobs in some of our communities. And we would join a long list of states that have embraced gaming for some time. Alaskans have always been a different breed. We've been hardened with the passage of time and adversity through generations. Very few come to the last frontier hoping to live a life of luxury. We cherish the challenge of building a future in the most rugged, beautiful, and resource-laden subcontinent on Earth. And what this pandemic has taught us is a hard lesson. In order to secure opportunity for our state and future Alaskans, we must begin the process of building a sovereign that can weather any disaster thrown our way. Whether it's food security, energy production, pharmaceuticals, or critical minerals, Alaska has more potential than most independent countries. I'll never forget when I got the news last spring that the Port of Seattle was contemplating closure as a result of this virus. That was truly a wake-up call. Ponder that for a moment. The most important port that serves Alaska was contemplating closure as a result of this pandemic. You have to wonder, where would this have left us? At the same time, our Canadian friends to the east were beginning the process of closing their borders to the passage of goods, services, and people as well. For a few moments in time, it looked like we were entirely on our own. Alaska was likely to be cut off, and we need to turn inward and rely on our own resources in order to get through this. This demonstrated to me that we have to examine our own vulnerabilities and reevaluate our dependence upon others. While we must continue to be an exporter of resources, we must also ensure that we have the capabilities to create and enhance new sectors of our economy to go it alone in the event of a future disaster. As a result, I've charged my administration with researching how Alaska can become more self-reliant within the framework of federalism. Part of becoming a truly self-reliant sovereign starts with the basics: food, security, energy, and medicine. My administration has embarked upon a process to strengthen our agricultural sector. We're going to start by making it easier for farmers to secure land with fewer regulations. We're going to support the growth of our agricultural sector and allow farmers to prosper. In addition, We're going to continue to support our growing mariculture industry as well. This industry has unlimited potential to provide food, wealth, and jobs to many Alaskans. I plan to begin conversations with industry stakeholders to determine what pharmaceuticals we can produce on our own here in Alaska. And as we look to increase our self-reliance, as we prepare to stand up new industries and to create the Alaska of the future, government can help when appropriate, but must get out of the way when it can't. We're taking a hard look at regulations that stifle innovation and frustrate Alaskans as well. If a regulation needs to be suspended during a crisis, we have to ask ourselves, why was it there in the first place, and can we live without it? I'll be working with my departments and the legislature to review as many of these regulations as possible for potential modification or repeal for the benefit of all Alaskans. If Alaska is to survive on its own, we must prioritize energy independence. For too long, our economy has been held back by the extreme cost of energy in many parts of the state. Alaska is surrounded by abundant sources of energy, both traditional and renewable, yet our energy costs are the second highest in the nation. This just isn't right. We must make pursuit of cheap and reliable energy a priority. We can start by harnessing the incredible renewable energy resources within Alaska itself. Alaska possesses more tidal energy than the rest of the nation combined. Our potential for wind, geothermal, inshore, and pumped hydro is practically unlimited. Tremendous opportunity awaits Alaska when we make energy independence a priority. We have the means to reduce our enormous power cost, attract new jobs, and deliver cheap Alaskan energy to Alaskans. I'll continue to engage with investors and Alaskans across the political spectrum to find projects that support these objectives. Both Alaskans that care about the environment and energy independence should be able to get behind many of these potential projects. We must also defend our right to develop traditional energy resources as well. As a resource-producing state, Alaska generates much of its revenue from this activity. More importantly, our Constitution compels us to do so, and it's the right thing to do for Alaskans. I reject the false premise between protecting the environment and developing our economy. This is the argument of outsiders who seek to divide us for their own benefits. These individuals and groups that sing the siren song of division, of non-development, of scare tactics in order to kill opportunity aren't doing this because they care about our great state. Remember, in many cases, they're doing it for their own special interests. We know better than anyone that we can develop our resources so that a clean environment and prosperity are two sides of the same coin. This week, I renewed my administration's commitment to stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of the North Slope to support responsible resource development in their region. In order to protect our rights, I requested that the legislature set aside $4 million to defend Alaska's statehood and sovereignty against the encroachment of an overreaching federal government. We must defend Alaska from those who seek to steal opportunity from our children and grandchildren, thereby turning Alaska into the largest national park in the country for a handful of billionaires and Hollywood elites, folks who couldn't care less about the individual Alaskan trying to get a job. Our message to Washington and the Wall Street billionaires must be clear. Canceling projects in Alaska and sending resource production to dirty producers overseas helps no one. Not the environment, and least of all, the many Alaskans in desperate need of economic opportunity. And let me also be direct with those who are committed to destroying Alaska by preventing our right to develop our resources. Make no mistake about it, I'll continue to fight for Alaska's destiny as long as I have the honor of serving you as governor. That's my promise to you. As we endeavor to build an Alaska that works for everyone, an Alaska capable of weathering the storms of the 21st century, and even going it alone when necessary, we cannot ignore the need to create new opportunities. This week, Alaska participated in a trade mission that attracted over 120 investors interested in unmanned aircraft systems. I'll continue working with the University of Alaska as they cement our position as a nation's leader in unmanned aircraft research. I've also introduced the framework for a $350 million bond package that I believe will put Alaskans back to work as soon as possible. Subject to a vote of the people, this package will target roads to resources, energy upgrades, and critical infrastructure projects. By acting now, we can turn historically low interest rates into historic opportunities for Alaskans. I'll also be introducing my proposal to offer every Alaskan the option of receiving their PFD in the form of a land voucher. What better way to provide opportunity than to allow Alaskans to create it for themselves? Not only will this benefit Alaskans who have dreamed of owning a piece of the last frontier, it'll assist the Treasury by reducing the draw on the permanent fund as well. To that end, I was honored to return the traditional grounds of the Gulkana people to their rightful owners earlier this year. For nearly 50 years and across 11 administrations, the elders of Gulkana Village never gave up. I'm thrilled we were able to work together to begin a new chapter in Gulkana's history, a chapter of new hope and possibilities. Whether it's getting land back in the hands of Alaskans or standing up new industries, we're going to capitalize on opportunity wherever possible. That's a promise. But maximizing opportunity is about more than standing up new industries. If we're to move Alaska forward, we must provide our children with the quality education they deserve. While we continue to get our students back into the classroom where they belong, there remains thousands of parent-turned-teachers who desperately need our support. This session, I'll be introducing legislation to increase funding for public homeschooling. Throughout the pandemic, public homeschooling has jumped from 11 to 22% of our students. While many students will return to their old schools in the future, some families have found that providing a quality education at home in partnership with their local school district is both possible and desirable. With so many parents now working remotely, many students will also choose to be educated remotely as well. It's important that we continue to meet the needs of these families through the purchase of textbooks, tutoring, and other educational materials and services. Our public schools must also be equipped to handle the educational upheaval brought by the pandemic. This year, I'll be establishing a temporary Governor's Office of Reading Instruction to ensure that federal relief money is properly targeted at improving reading scores. As we all know, Alaska's reading scores are far below acceptable levels. We must target these funds carefully to address any learning deficits caused by the pandemic. Finally, I've directed the Department of Education to establish summer camps to boost the reading, math, and coding skills of our students, and to create an apprenticeship program that will allow high schoolers to earn credit while working for local businesses. By providing young Alaskans a chance to explore both the sciences and technical trades, we give them the power to choose, not just their own future, but Alaska's future as well. And we must do everything in our power to protect that future from those who seek to tear Alaska down. 2 years ago, I stood before you and promised a different Alaska, one where criminals, not law-abiding citizens, are the ones forced to look over their shoulder. Today, I'm happy to report that our communities are filled with less crime and more troopers. Thanks to the brave work of Alaska's finest, we experienced a 10% drop in crime last year. We trained a historic number of recruits at the Alaska State Trooper Academy and are on track to do so again in 2021. We became the first of 8 Western states to upgrade our fingerprint system, increasing our ability to successfully identify perpetrators by 30%. We released more funds than ever before to our 35 domestic violence shelters, child advocacy centers, and victim service programs. We solved a number of long-standing cold cases, allowing the families of Sophie Sergi, Jessica Began, and Shelley Connolly to receive justice at long last. My administration is committed to solving every one of these cases to bring justice to every single family. And we remain on track to clear the state's long-standing sexual assault kit testing backlog by this September. This year, Our work continues with plans to establish a major crimes unit focused on prosecuting felony sex crimes in Western Alaska. For too long, this region of our state has been plagued by unacceptable levels of sexual violence against our most vulnerable. While we can't undo the past, we can do everything in our power to protect Alaskans now and in the future. To that same end, my budget calls for $7 million to be put toward ramping up the prosecution of those who commit crimes of sexual assault and domestic violence. Finally, I requested that the legislature fully fund each of our domestic violence and sexual assault programs. As the father of 3 wonderful young women, I'll never stop battling to eliminate this scourge on our great state. I remain 100% committed to prosecuting the war on crime and supporting our frontline heroes. From our smallest villages to our largest cities, no Alaskan should be forced to live in fear. This evening, we've talked a lot about self-reliance, the need for energy independence, and maximizing every opportunity. Alaska is a place where big dreams were once pursued and achieved. Whether it was furs and fishing, whether it was mining oil and now gas, Alaska has the resources to deliver big, not just for our country, but for the entire world. One of the dreams that has been talked about for generations is the ability to make use of our abundant but stranded natural gas on the North Slope. And today, I'm happy to say, we've never been closer to realizing a privately led gas line project from the North Slope than we are right now. With a number of permits in place, research completed, and private investment nearing reality, we have an opportunity to realize a dream of generations and put Alaska back on track to provide many of our citizens with cheap, clean natural gas for decades to come. A completed gas line from the North Slope to our road system creates endless possibilities, such as cheap, reliable, and clean energy for our residents, for military bases, and for potential manufacturing and new industries. A gas line led by private initiative would be an absolute game changer and a chance to once again show the world that energy independence and protecting our environment are not mutually exclusive. Before I go, I'd like to share a few thoughts on the challenges that lie before us. Sadly, we've seen no shortage of discord in our nation this past year. A lack of civility, the absence of discourse, and rampant cancel culture have invaded every level of our society. For months on end, some politicians have normalized violence and criminal activity in many cities across our country. Yet through every trial, whether it be pandemics, landslides, or political upheaval, Alaskans never once faltered. When our nation descended into chaos this spring and summer, you set an example. No riots, no statue pullings, no looting, just Alaskans looking out for each other as we always have. Alaskans who believe in listening to one another, in charting a course away from the discord facing our great nation. A people who believe that north to the future is more than just the greatest motto in history. It's how we live our lives. A beacon that lights the way for future generations. As I close tonight, I reflect on the promise I made 1 year ago, that Alaskans will beat this pandemic and will emerge stronger and more united than ever. I still believe in those words. Because of this pandemic, we have incredible opportunities before us. We are surrounded by so many possibilities. Everything we need to become self-reliant and create endless opportunity for our kids and grandkids exists right here in our great state. And now, it's up to us to decide. Do we turn towards those whose only goal is to divide Alaska until Alaska has nothing left to offer our children and grandchildren? Do we give credence to provocateurs and demagogues who won't be satisfied until no two Alaskans see eye to eye? When our history is written, will it be that we forced our children to look beyond Alaska's shores for the American dream? That we stood by until Alaska was nothing more than a handful of holdouts fighting to be the last park ranger? Or will it be said that this was our finest hour, that we ignored the calls of divisiveness and pulled together like Alaskans always have, that we never took no for an answer and refused to accept that it couldn't be done, that we followed in the legacy of those who built great things because they believed they could, that we relied on each other, leaving no Alaskan behind and no opportunity left unturned, that we left behind a world so rich in opportunity that nothing was left to stand between our children and their dreams. My friends, the future is ours to decide. It truly is up to us. So with that said, I want to thank you. And God bless the great state of Alaska. Good night.
Well, you've just heard from Governor Dunleavy. He had a brief 25-minute address. Normally that would be done right here in the state capitol. Of course, with a lot of our COVID-19 issues that we're facing, we couldn't fit all into one large room. The governor, I believe, is in Anchorage right now. This is a departure from the normal way that it happens. We also would normally be able to ask a couple questions of him. The press would, of course, be around. And again, it's just the interaction is a lot different now during this COVID-19 response here in the Capitol. I appreciate all the comments that were made over the message system and the chat system. And I just wanted to let you know that if there are other questions or comments that you can reach me, I'll put some information here about what he had to say, as well as some other information dealing with some of the comments that have been made that I don't have the answers to. I will say this about the governor's address. You know, he did talk about the COVID-19 response right off and right at the beginning. And I know that there's a lot of folks, not just here in the Capitol, but small businesses that have been impacted, even larger businesses that have been impacted. And it's been a real challenge, particularly in Fairbanks, in rural Alaska here, in Juneau. And, you know, it's a real challenge. And so what we plan to do here as legislators is really look down into the local levels and figure out a way to improve the economy overall. I know there's a lot of people who are struggling. One of the initiatives that the governor has introduced is a larger PFD, and a PFD that's early in the session. Originally, when he introduced that, he looked at the difference in the earnings reserve account, permanent fund earnings reserve account between two specific dates. Of course, those were the worst date and then one of the best dates in December. And it looked like the earnings reserve account had gained $11 billion. Of course, that's not the actual truth, and it's been much less than that. But we do need to think about ways that we can provide for folks that really need the sort of help that and sort of boost to the local economies. Other things that came about COVID-19, I could just tell you that this legislature has looked at ways to ensure that teachers are up on the list so that they can get the COVID-19 vaccinations early. I know there's a lot of teachers that are maybe older, maybe need the vaccine more than others. We are trying to get that done, trying to figure out how we can ensure that both seniors age 65 and older, folks with specific jobs that require in-person contact, like medical professionals, police officers, fire safety. We're trying to make sure that those folks get that dose first. We're having some trouble with how much is coming from the federal government and in what frequency. So when you look at the website, the Alaska Vax website that has the vaccinations and how much a particular area is going to get, sometimes those numbers aren't reflective of how many actually get delivered. If a person were to make an appointment and then not show up, then that's a problem. If a person were to show up and then not show up for their second appointment, that's a problem. So it's really sort of a system that we are working at, trying to get better. And I know I've gotten a lot of emails about how we can make that better, but every comment that comes to our office gets forwarded on so that we can help refine the system. So I just wanted to let folks know that it is coming. It's coming slower than we wanted to. We should have anticipated that this is going to be just as difficult as our original COVID-19 mandates that the governor had introduced. But we are really working closely with the Department of Health and Social Services, with Ann Zink, the Chief Medical Officer, as well. There's a message here from Susan. I'll just go ahead and say, since she's online, that we are working with what he said is called homeschooling. There is a specific part in the base student allocation which deals with correspondence and schools that go, locally we have the Raven Academy, Raven schools. But what that means is that there would actually be more money coming to the public school system across the states, depending upon how many people are homeschooling. And rather than just what we normally pay as 90% of a student who's in homeschooling, we pay the 100%. Some of that money would be used internally for internal issues, and some of the money would be transferred so that it would be to help administer the school system. Let's see. Yep, Kathy, totally agree, Kathy, that teachers need to get vaccinated ASAP. It is an issue that, again, that we are working on to make sure that that students get back to the classrooms. But students and teachers have to get back to the classrooms. Students, teachers, support staff, anybody that's going to be interacting in small spaces, confined spaces with a lot of people, need to get those vaccinations first. I know that there has been a movement here in the legislature to get legislators vaccinated, and I'll reject that for now until we see the folks who really need it to get it first. We mask up every day. We mask up. If I were with other people in this office, I'd be masked up right now. We have temperature checks here at the state capitol every day, and we also have to get tested every 3 days to make sure that we don't have COVID-19 and bring it into this Capitol building. So the kinds of things that are happening right here in the state Capitol, governor's on the 3rd floor, he does the same thing. The kinds of things that are happening here should be happening at every school, at every venue where there's a lot of folks that are working. Frontline workers need to get vaccinated, and we are working through the system to ensure that this happens. Let's see, there's a question about heating assistance. If you have a question specifically about the LIHEAP or the Heating and Energy Assistance Program, feel free to give me a call. Again, I'll put that in the message, but you can also give me a call at 465-3466. That's my main line, and I would be happy to answer you. You can also send me an email at my email. It's senator.scott.kawasaki@akleg.gov. And I'll also put that in the chat. But I certainly do appreciate the great comments, and Chris, feel free to give me a call. We were schoolmates together, and I do trust your opinion on everything that has to do with school. We may not have been the best of students during that time, but I think you've done pretty well for yourself since you're a teacher now, and just wanted to thank you for teaching. I guess I'll end this. We originally thought that I was going to be able to speak over him at the same time. That sort of didn't work. So this is a new process. We'll probably do a couple more things like this where we're going to do side-by-sides, and we'll have the opportunity to speak. We're also going to try and invite other folks who are online to be able to comment in the future. This is, again, pretty new for me. As much as I'm computer savvy, it's a different way to communicate with the public. Of course, we don't get to reach folks that are not on Facebook, not on Zoom, not online, but we are trying to do our best to meet the needs of the constituents of the district. And so I certainly appreciate any comments that you have, any questions that you might have. It's probably questions that other folks have. We have an email, an e-newsletter that comes out every 7 or 8 days. We have a paper newsletter. We try and advertise everything we can on social media as well. It's just the ease of use. But again, there's a lot of people that may not have the ability to access legislators in the Capitol during this time. So whatever thing that you can do to help to make sure that folks know what's going on in Juneau and try to give us sort of an idea of what's going on in Fairbanks right now, quite frankly, is very helpful to me at a time when we're pretty much locked down in Juneau for the rest of the session. I can tell you that session again we're about 10% of the way through the legislative session. We will continue on with things here, and we're going to do our best to try and get out of here within the 90-day session. But of course, we'll stay until the job gets done, and that's really the important part of it. If you do have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. We're going to end this live chat here in a couple minutes, but I did want to say that thank you all very much for your comments that are in the chat. And again, you can reach me through email, directly by phone. I'll try and give you a call back within the next day or so. And I am just really excited to be here down in Juneau, being able to represent the people of the city of Fairbanks and the rest of the state. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed this brief State of the State watch party, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.